a country raised on ancient values that is driven by the holy scriptures of the Quran. Only in recent years, due to foreign intervention, has the ancient land begun to modernize and to adapt as to continue their Islamic faith while being a powerful nation. During the Cold War, a dramatic change occurred worldwide with the establishment of the three worlds and the tense relations between nations. In terms of Iran, the establishment of an illegitimate ruler, Shah Reza Pahlavi, whose policies were unrepresentative of the Iranian people and focused on westernization and the admittance of the United States CIA, and eventually leading to huge disparities of wealth. An absolute monarchy, radicalism, solidified hate of the Western world, terrorism, and overall unease. The Shah's main focus while in power was to modernize the very traditional country of Iran and to become a dominating, progressive, and competitive force in the Western world. However, as much as these policies appeared progressive and great improvements for Iran, they were enforced far too quickly than the traditional, focused Iranians could comprehend, causing distrust with the nation's leader. Shah wanted to make major agricultural reforms that would improve crop production to create an abundance of crops for an improved economy. When his clergymen were in opposition of his reforms, he accused them of being reactionary and far too traditional than the modern world should permit. To continue westernization, the Shah called for the construction of new universities and libraries to increase education throughout Iran for both men and women. Education for women was an extreme reform for this time period in Iran because many Muslims still believed that women were subordinate to men and should not be educated. However, the most aggravating policy to the Iranians was the shared oil reserves with the United States at about 40%. Iran also resumed Anglo-Iranian oil operations. Many Iranians wanted foreign powers out of oil operations as they were using their resources to benefit their own economies and not Iran's nationalist idea. Nationalists felt the United States was far too present in Iranian affairs, making them an opposing and threatening force that is manipulating the country. In addition, the Shah aided select businesses creating monopolies and leaving many Iranians unemployed. As a result, many Iranians were not making enough money to support themselves or their families. The Shah's reforms, although seemingly helpful, were inappropriate and far too rapid for the time period, thus creating distrust from the Iranian people and hurting the equal development of all markets of modernization. Solely focused on westernization, the Shah confronted all people in opposition of his reforms, declaring them reactionary and harmful to the development of the country and creating fear amongst the people. At a meeting with clergymen in regards to agricultural reforms, the Shah accused members of being reactionary because they did not want to change centuries of old agricultural traditions. To prevent any negativity, the Shah had many nationalists, Tudeh party members, radicals, and anyone opposed to his policies arrested, tortured, and executed. The method at which the Shah chose to influence the Iranians was completely inappropriate and a violation of human rights, as it prevented any form of freedom of speech and partly inspired the movements that led to a coup over himself. The policies and practices the Shah implemented were very unrepresentative of the majority of Iran's people, who still held traditional values and therefore opposing the dramatically different values of the Western world and establishing a communal hate of the unreligious Western world. Iran's like many third world countries. People were afraid of potential Cold War conflict, and by allowing the United States to become more present in Iran, the war was brought closer. One of the biggest concerns of the Iranians, however, was the United States and how many other Western nations are far too strong and use their power to assert dominance over all weaker nations as to exploit resources. This time period marks the establishment of hate toward interfering Western nations, such as the United States. This became problematic because British companies hold the majority of power over Iran's oil. There are valid reasons as to why Iranians and many Muslims hate the United States. But by the Shah admitting the United States to take a more prominent role in their government, Iranians were only further aggravated that such a forceful and impeding power could be admitted into their nation by a ruler claiming to express the best interests of the people. Prime Minister Mossadegh was a highly loved and respected man in Iranian politics since the young age of 15. Therefore, when he was overthrown from power, it was proven to the Iranians that their voice in government was not relevant, and they were under the absolutism of the Shah, essentially ending the beginnings of a new democratic nation. Mossadegh was a political representative since the age of 15 after his father, a highly respected politician, passed away. As a nationalist, he self-expelled and protested against Switzerland, the country he studied in, since they were negotiating the ownership of Iran's oil, which he felt was not the position of distant foreign governments. He promised the nationalization of Iran's oil, hopefully ending the intervening power of the Western world. Loved by his people, Mossadegh had national support from the majority of Iran, for he represented their best interests. Therefore, as would be expected, after his coup, many Iranians felt hopeless, defined, and under the control of the United States, crushing any progress made to become a self-sufficient, powerful nation. Ultimately, as a result of an illegitimate and corrupt government, the implementation of Western values, and fear, the people of Iran became bound together with the sole mission to end the United States' ability to interfere with other subordinate nations by means of terrorism and forming a new Islamic state. People felt they needed to prove to the United States they were not the only people who could cause physical destruction, therefore creating terrorist organizations to fight the Americans. Khomeini, a growing religious political figure and first supreme leader of Iran, inspired no fear in the eyes of Muslims as they were fighting for God. In January of 1979, the Islamic Revolution broke out at the end of the Shah's reign of terror, and to begin the Islamic State of Iran. This revolution created radical actions such as an attack the United States Embassy in Iran to collect information, cause fear, and out of pure anger. Led by Islam, the Iranians were convinced it was their priority to end the intervention of the United States in Iran and to reclaim their nation to return it back to the prosperous religious state that is declared in the Quran and will one day succeed in therefore ending any alliances between Iran and the United States and beginning years of conflict and radicalism. The westernization of Iran was harmful to its development because it directly impeded the slow yet happening formation of a democratic society and demeaned the important voice of the people. By the United States directly intervening in Iran's political system, there was solidified hate for the Western world, for their new leader represented Western ideals and not the best interests of the Iranians, which is enough reason to anger any community. The Shah, while in power, ignored the interests of his people and sought only for the support of the United States and his increased wealth and quality of living. His power assuredly confirmed to the people of Iran that they were subject to the force of the United States. A world leader is the face of its citizens and represents them as a culture. Therefore, it is not right to demean a nationally recognized group of people by establishing a leader that does not embody the most modern ideals of the citizens. Due to the implementation of the Shah in 1953, the United States has effectively developed an unnecessary feud between Westerners in the Middle East that has left a legacy of terrorist groups to fight the United States people in their political actions.